How are you feeling?
I am feeling great. It's the end of the day. We're close to the reception. But I'm feeling, so my group and I, my team and I, we have a group chat, and as you can imagine, it's been going off all day. And there were moments through the day, and I'm like, why am I so emotional? And it's really because I have been incredibly inspired today. I have been incredibly motivated, and I feel fueled for what's next.
Yeah. What are some of the things you've picked up on today?
So some of you joined us yesterday for our pre-summit, snap, snap for our pre-summit folks. And, between today and yesterday, tons of themes. One, obviously, collaboration and community and connection. Those are the three big things that kind of pulled out: collaboration, community, connection. And I saw that as some of you probably just saw me walking around the room, looking at people, tapping folks on the shoulder, saying hello. But it was beautiful because I would sort of tap folks, and I'm like, hey, do you know each other? Like, no, we just met. And there were so many folks who were engaging with one another as if, they're family. And so I felt that. I also will say that a critical theme that we've been talking about in the last 2 days is relationship building. So we're talking about trust, but trust is predicated on relationship building. And so I believe by all of us being here today, we're actually starting that, right? We're building those relationships that I hope will transcend beyond this space.
Yeah, I will say I've had more hugs at this conference than I have at any other summit I've attended before. When you think about the work ahead, and there's a lot of work to do, something that struck me as I've spoken with so many of you today is that this is a room full of people who are deeply committed to what they're doing. And we can talk about the work as though it's just project-based, or it's just about logistics, or just about finding the right funding. But what we're talking about is people. Mm-hmm. Who have their own lives, who are deeply affected by the work they do, who need emotional care and support. So how do we make sure the weavers don't get unraveled while they're doing this work?
That's a beautiful question, and I know it resonates with those of you in the room because I hear some deep sighs, right? Mm-hmm. I would say, as part of our work with the Alliance for Social Trust, one of our pillars, we've got 3 goals, and one of them is strengthening and aligning and building spaces just like this, right? So the summit is sort of our, what I would say, allowing everyone to know who we are. This is our first big event with the Alliance for Social Trust. But we really wanted to focus on how are we aligning the work that people are doing, recognizing that there's so much great work that's happening, but how are we also building spaces where you feel like you have a community? There's so many folks who are doing great work and they're like, oh, I'm a trust builder? Like, I didn't even know I was a trust builder. And it's like, yeah, you are a trust builder. And one of the things that's important to us is shifting the identity and narrative about what it means to be a trust builder. And I think it's important that each of you see yourselves as trust builders, because then you're like, oh wow, I've got a friend next to me that's doing very similar work. I've got someone that's in my community, or someone that's in a nearby state that I can reach out to. And so I think today is a critical part of being able to establish that self-care that we all need by also relying on our community. A lot of times when I'm sort of struggling, I'm tired, I've had a long day or a long week or a long month, a lot of the reason why I feel that way is because often I feel isolated in the work that I'm doing. Or it feels like it's only me, or I'm the only person that cares. And so being in a space like this and realizing, wait, there are more of us. It's like Avengers Unite, right? And so I'm really hoping that many of you who are in this room feel like you've met someone, you've made a new friend, but most especially someone that you can lean on because you are doing similar work. And if you haven't already, I challenge you in the next couple of minutes and hours that we have left together to find someone and say, hey, let's exchange numbers. I'd love to hear more about the work that you're doing. Text me, call me when it feels like, you can't do it any longer, and support one another.
Yeah. But what that also says to me is that the people who are in this room aren't here by chance.
Yes.
This is the first time we've done this.
It is.
So who did you want in this room?
I wanted you all. That's why you're here. So one thing that you will probably hear me say, my team and I, we were very intentional about the folks that we wanted in the room, right? You are not here by accident. And when you received an invitation, maybe it said, oh, if you can't make it, we'd love to have someone from your organization represented. We wanted to make sure that there was diversity in the work, cross-sector diversity. So you've seen probably interacted with some academics and researchers and corporate leaders and nonprofit leaders and social innovators. That was very intentional. One, to emphasize that we're all doing the work in different ways, right? The other thing that was important to us was diversity regionally. So I know we've got some people from the South in the room. Okay. We got some people from the West Coast. Okay, Northeast. Okay, Midwest. Hawaii.
Yeah.
But we were very intentional about the regional diversity as well, because issues that you face in Compton are very different than the issues that you face in Baltimore or the issues that you face in Atlanta. But at the core of it is sort of this idea around trust. And so, it was invitation only, but we wanted to make sure that we were able to have fruitful conversations. And so it's very important to make sure that you have the right people. But then more importantly, Jen, we also wanted to make sure that we had the people who were doing the work. And, I find that often, sometimes those people aren't invited in spaces like this. And so it was important for us to do that.
Yeah. How are you thinking about the stakes of this moment?
I've had quite a few people stop me through the day, so thank you for pouring into me, who have said, I go to many summits and convenings, but this one is different. And I've had many people, someone said to me this morning, they said, in a moment when there isn't much joy, I've had so much joy in this room. So it takes me back to the pew conversation this morning when we say, how do you look at the glass? Is it half full? Or is it half empty? And so when I think about the stakes, I recognize what is ahead. I think that it would be irresponsible to not acknowledge what's happening. But as I said, I'm also incredibly inspired because of what I've heard. Mm-hmm. I'm incredibly inspired because people have said, this felt good, this is great, I am energized in terms of what I do next. And I also want to say, because a lot of people have said, how are you feeling, Jummy? How's the day going? And it was never about the day for me. It was always about what's next. Mm-hmm. So we've had conversation, and now the question is, how do we catalyze the conversation and dialogue to meaningful action? Mm-hmm. And so that's what I'm going to challenge everyone as you leave here. I'm sort of a person that I need some time to process. So don't ask me how I'm feeling now. Ask me in like 48 hours. I need some time to process, but I really challenge you all to do the same. When you're on your flights home or when you're in your hotel room, really reflect on what you've learned and then think about, okay, what's next?
Yeah, it's been a rich day for me, and it's been really nice to just take a step out of the news cycle for a moment and have a chance to be in community with people who are doing this work, because again, we hear from so many of our listeners, they don't know what to do, they feel disempowered, they feel hopeless, and telling people to write to their congressperson feels deeply unsatisfying to them. They want to do something that feels like action, and knowing that it can be done at a grassroots level is something we can bring back to them.
Yes. And knowing that it's as simple as saying hello to your neighbor, right? That's where it starts. And so I do hope that, particularly for those of us in the room who feel like I have been trying to figure out what it is that I need to do or I want to do, I hope that you've gotten a little bit of inspiration through our panel discussions, through our spotlight speakers, through conversations you've had with one another. But I hope that we all leave recognizing that it's not this grand thing, right? It really does start from a simple conversation.
Yeah. I feel like I've been asking you a lot of questions. Do you have questions for me?
You know, Jen, well, here's the thing. I do have a question for you. You are not new to this.
Yeah.
And you're not new to this space, and you've been a part of the Aspen family for some time, and you've engaged in conversations with Tom and Dan. You've been at Aspen Ideas Festival. You've written a piece about this social trust work. I'm curious, you know, how you're feeling. You've been the glue to our day. So a round of applause for Jenn White. I'm curious about how you're feeling, and particularly, and you alluded to it, but particularly how you're feeling from the work that you do.
Yeah, it's an interesting time to be in journalism. I gave a TED talk late last year about democracy, and I ended it with a question, who will we choose to be? It was prior to the election. And since that speech, I've heard from a lot of people about what they think the answer to that question is. And sometimes it's deep, it's very hopeful, sometimes it's heartbreaking. But something happened between that speech and now, and I'll connect the dots. It has to do with my dress. A lot of you have commented on my dress, and I wore this dress deliberately, not planning to speak about it, but this dress was made for me in Rwanda. We spent Christmas in Rwanda with my sister-in-law and her family. She, for at least the next few weeks, works for USAID. And while we were in Rwanda, we had a chance to visit the Genocide Museum. And one of the most moving experiences of my life. And it showed how a country could get to a place where in the space of 100 days, almost 1 million people would be killed, not just by military forces, but by their neighbors. And the path to that moment is very complex. It's very complex and more than we have time to talk about today. But before we went to Rwanda, my sister-in-law talked to us and she said, listen, when you get here, do not ask anyone if they are Hutu or Tutsi. She said that is not part of the conversation here anymore. And it's threaded throughout the museum as well. If you ask someone whether they're Hutu or Tutsi, they will say, I'm Rwandan. They created a different social contract after that dark period in their history. And it's not to say that Rwanda is a perfect country and that it doesn't have its issues. Every country does. But the people made a decision that their future was going to look different. And for the young people in that country, many of whom grew up without parents because their parents were murdered during the massacre, there's deep trauma, but there's also a commitment to something different. And what was startling to me walking through the museum were the echoes of what's happening in our country right now, in the messaging and the political speech and the media. My husband and I just stood next to each other in tears because it felt so familiar. So what I am coming away from this day with is that the stakes are high, but the work is also being done. And so I want to thank you all for sending me back to DC encouraged, and with the understanding that I'm not in this work alone,
Absolutely.
and that there is a community of people committed to keeping this country intact, keeping us in community with one another, and of creating a country where our young people can feel trust, both in institutions and in one another.
Thank you, Jenn. So in the time that we have remaining, Jenn, I'd love to actually hear from our participants and those in the room. So we've got some mics in the room, and if you feel so compelled, if the spirit moves you, I'd love for folks to share, if there's one thing that stood out from the day, or one thing that you are left with, or what you're going to do next based off of what you've heard over the last day or 2 days for some of you. So if you'd like, please join us at the mic to share about your experience or what's next for you.
Hello, I'm Joni Friedman, and I just wanted to honor and underline one thing you guys said today, which was we need spaces to pour into the people who are doing the weaving. And so in the spirit of generosity, I just want to let people know at the University of Chicago, we have a 4-day, all-expense-paid retreat for anyone who's doing this kind of weaving work called the Civic Actor Studio. And if you want to learn more, just come and get in touch with me. But I just wanted to let you know it's so important to invest in those who are investing in others. So thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Hi, Courtney Sanders from Blue Star Families. I just want to thank everyone who had a hand in putting this together. I know myself, I've made multiple connections here outside of my sector, so it's going to be a lot of cross-collaboration going on for me. I know leaving here, I have a lot more work to do now because I have made those connections, and we'll be setting up several meetings with people sitting in this room to figure out how we can go further, how we can work together to do something more for the betterment of both of our organizations and the betterment of our community as we all live in the same space. So again, thank you to all of you for putting this on. This has been just a highlight of my year so far.
Thank you, Courtney.
Thank you. I am Dr. Lisa Blythe-Jones, CEO of Chicago Jobs Council, and I have to say this has been so timely. You talked about intentionality. So yesterday I was in DC, and my identity yesterday was all about being an advocate. So I thank you that today, after coming home from DC, you have helped me add to my identity as a trust builder. And so I needed that, and so I thank you for this space today to give me that to walk away with. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think here in the room. Yeah, you first, and then we'll come there. Yeah.
Hello. I am Jamila Stuckey, representing Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so one, I want to say thank you as well. I want to double tap, like, and love everything people have already said. I appreciate that. The other thing that I want to say is some things that we talked about at our table. One was like around creating like a mini toolkit, or for you all to kind of create that to help us recreate this in the spaces that we are in, and how we can continue to like build connection. Ooh, she's writing that down. We love that. The other thing that I am intentionally doing, I already have called my friend who is the mayor of Tulsa, as well as the CRO, and so I'm going to talk about some things that we can do in Tulsa and some ideas that I have to do the long table, to talk with Africa about what it looks like to make North Tulsa an urban oasis, right? Like it once was for Black Wall Street. And so those types of intentional ways to do that. But the one thing that I'm also like leaving with is how do we have that accountability? Because when we talk about building trust, you do what you said you were going to do, right? So what does that look like to continue to have this group and these connections here? I want to say thank you again.
So I'm not sure I'm going to get this quite right, but I'm going to give it a try. I have found it very powerful today and yesterday to be led in building trust and hope by so many amazing Black leaders. And especially in the context of all the reasons why African Americans have to not trust and not have hope, 406 years of reasons. And so I just wanted to express that because it's been really meaningful. And I also wanted to give a shout out to Jummy because I have a strong suspicion that didn't happen by accident.
Thank you, Jason.
Hi, my name is Joseph Arroyo. I'm with Cities Forward. I wasn't sure what we were walking into today. And in a very good way, I'm walking away with more questions about how to do this work. I think the thing that's Cities Forward works with local governments to leverage their trust that they have with residents, but also how do we help improve civic life through a variety of ways. And I think the thing that has really hit me today from all the sessions is what are we doing to earn trust, and how are we demonstrating and acknowledging the missteps of the institutions that we're trying to restore. And if we're not being honest about what we've done wrong and what those implications are, like how are we going to earn trust back? And part of the stuff that I've heard that has been really powerful is trusting people and this idea of co-creation. But I think the place where like collaboration is very exciting and the opportunity to learn more is not just sharing a good and bad story, but it's telling the truth and being honest and not trying to walk into communities hiding your hand of what your desired outcomes are for that community, but really thinking through of what they might want to do is nothing that it could even imagine. And that's okay, right? And so like what are the roles of our institutions to go back to serving people instead of being above people? Like we are in service of them, not the other way around. And how do we make that transformation? And how do I get other people to buy into it that are not in this room today?
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Trevon Williams, Senior Vice President of Marketing Communications with the NAACP. If we were in church, I'd say I'm full. I'm full. Just truly refreshed and inspired by what you all were able to put together today. In my field in particular, it's extremely exhausting. There is no off switch for what we're enduring on a day-to-day basis. And so to walk into a room and allow so many different people from so many different backgrounds to effectively put a battery in your back and tell you it's not just you, you can keep going, it's incredibly inspiring. I'll leave you all with this, and I have an older son who's 11 and a younger daughter who's 7. And at the time where Vice President Harris was sworn in as Vice President of the United States, I asked him, do you know the significance of this? And he said, yes, she's the first female and Black Vice President of the United States. And I said, that's very good, son. And I went on typing on my computer, and then he said, well, that means Sloan can do that too. He saw it and he knew it was possible because it was put before him. I thank you all for showing us what's possible by putting it before us today. We're inspired by what you all did, and thank you so much for granting us the opportunity to be here.
Thank you. We have time for 2 more.
Yeah.
Okay. Parthena Fields with Springboard to Opportunities. Thank you so much for the invitation to be in this space with other people who are also doing this work of building trust with people. Coming from an organization who prides ourselves on relationship and trust building with our community members, I want to say the highlight of today for me, not just being able to have good conversations, but the research. We love data, right? The research that helps to help me begin to work more deeply with our team, because we've had questions about why what we had been doing is not working with the people that we're working with now. And the data showed us that with that particular generation that we are now working with, we need to really begin to think about how we're shifting what we're doing and some ways in which we can be more effective in that work and continue to build the types of relationships that we're used to, right? Some of that has shifted, particularly after the pandemic. And so thank you for that. That was an extremely important portion for me, and I made copious notes to take back with me. But I'm also being able to develop some relationships and hear from other people who are doing this work as well. So this is much appreciated.
Thank you, Parthenia.
Hi, Doug Schenkelberg. I'm with the Chicago Coalition to End Homelessness. I'm one of those people who wasn't sure why I was invited here. I was pretty sure it was a mistake. But I came not really knowing what to expect, and really being burdened, like a lot of us, with the moment that we're in and what we're seeing on a day-to-day basis. And a lot of work that we do is community organizing with folks experiencing homelessness. And they are folks who have well-earned distrust of the systems around them and who are often not trusted for a variety of bad reasons. And I understood as we went through yesterday and went through today how our work connects with the work with a lot of other organizations, regardless of what issue they're working on, what space they hold. And I come out of this today with a level of hope and optimism that I have had a really hard time finding over the past several weeks and months, and this was needed. And so I thank you for this moment and for giving me something I didn't know was out there to have.
Thank you.
Well, everyone, please, let's give another big round of applause to Jummy Banjo.